Yesterday, we folded the pages for our sketchbook. Today, we are going to be looking at constructing the covers. To get started, there's going to be a few different materials that you're going to grab out. Some are going to be up at the front counter, and then there'll be two things that'll be elsewhere. So the supplies you're going to grab from the front counter are going to be 2 pieces of book board. It's going to look kind of like thin cardboard. You'll grab 2 tan cover papers. You're going to grab 2 end slips. These vary in color just depending on semester. And then you're also going to grab 2 pieces of parchment. These are going to look like wax paper where they're kind of semi-transparent. And then other items that you're going to grab newspaper from the front. This is just going to help make cleanup a lot easier for you, as well as help just preserve the tables. You'll also grab... This will end up being a choice supply. If you want to use a utility knife or box cutter, you're going to grab the cutting mat from the front counter. The box cutter will be over by my desk. If you don't want to use a box cutter, you can also just use a pair of scissors, and then you don't have to grab out a cutting mat. And then last couple supplies, you're going to grab a container of glue. Try to share those with 2 to 3 people at your table, and then you'll also grab a glue brush. And then last thing you'll grab is a bone folder. It'll be the same ones as yesterday. They'll just be stacked up by the extra sketchbook pages. When you return to your table, you're going to bring everything over, and then you're going to start with the book board, the cover paper, and then you'll also grab out the piece of newspaper. I would say start by laying out that newspaper on your table. Then what you're going to do is you're going to put the cover pages down first, those tan papers, and then you're going to put the book board over top. This is going to make it a little bit easier so that you have those few areas of coverage when you glue, and it's also going to be helping you as you construct, going through that step by step. In this demo, I'm just going to do one cover at a time. That said, if you want to do both covers, you're welcome to. You'll just have one on either side and then go through each step twice. So it should look something like this as you get it set up. You're also going to grab out the glue brush and glue. And then first step that we're going to look at is getting a layer of glue on the book board. So you're going to take that glue brush, you're going to get some glue on there. And then what you're going to do is get an even, relatively thin coat of glue, coating that whole surface, essentially thinking of even enough that it is getting full application. It's going to be very adhesive, but not either so much glue that you have like just blobs of glue, or so thin that it's drying out before you flip it over. And then once you have that fully covered, you're going to flip that over onto the cover paper, kind of thinking of just having it being aligned with the sides, thinking kind of like a picture in a picture frame, having those sides match either end and that those look fairly even. If it is a little crooked, that's fine, but try to aim for that fairly parallel placement. And then once you're happy with that, you're going to start from the middle, press out to the sides. This is going to help just avoid any air pockets. And then once you have that fully smoothed out and pressed down, you can also flip it over, take one of the bone folders, and then just re-emphasize that placement. And then that will also help kind of smush out any air bubbles that might have formed. Once you're happy with the cover, you're going to flip it back over, and then we're going to start preparing it for wrapping those sides around to the inside. At this point, if you're using a cutting mat and X-Acto, you're going to switch from the newspaper over to that cutting mat. If you're working with scissors, you can just keep the newspaper down. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start to trim the corners. As you trim the corners for this, you're thinking of trimming off a triangle at the corner. Usually you want to keep a little bit of distance in between where you're trimming to the corner of the bookboard. If you trim too close, the bookboard itself is going to gape out as it wraps around. So you'll leave yourself about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. You can kind of think of like width of a pencil. It's usually about where you're aiming for. If you're not sure, you can always trim off less to start and then go to more. But if you kind of look at that line, there's that little bit of placement in between. That's what you're looking for when you get that trimmed. And then with scissors, you're just going to go through, trim each corner. And then it'll pretty much be the same steps with a box cutter. Just a couple reminders with the box cutter. You're going to have that notch that you're going to press down and then slide forward to open, slide back to close. When you use those, you want to keep it at about that 45-degree angle. Try to avoid having it directly like perpendicular with your surface or directly against where it's kind of just skating and then not really cutting. So about that 45 usually works out just fine. And then same thing, you're going to trim off those corners, leaving that little bit of space between where you trim and the corner of the book board. Same thing as with scissors. If you are unsure of where to cut, you can always trim off less to start and then adjust and cut off more later on if you need to. Once you have those corners trimmed, then what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick pre-fold just to help ease those sides over to the inside of your cover. To do this, there's a way to do this where it's kind of in the mindset of work smarter, not harder. You're going to press one of those edges against your surface. Then what you're going to do is hinge it up and over so that it creates that seam all at once, whereas by hand it does take a little bit more time. So you'll do that with each side, just pressing against your surface, hinging it over that paper that you want to fold to the inside, and then you'll just repeat on each edge. Makes it really easy, gives you a really nice crisp clean fold for each side, and just saves you a lot of time. So once you have that done for each side, then what we're going to do is we're going to start the second application of glue. So if you are still on your cutting mat, you're going to switch that over to your newspaper. If you were using scissors, you should be good to go. And then for the second application of glue, we're going to be creating a frame around the edge to glue up just those sides for now. Usually the width of your paintbrush works out just fine as you go around each edge, and then what you're going to do is essentially just going to be a frame around that edge, kind of same application as before, thinking thin, fairly thin, even layer of glue, and you're just going to go around the edge for now. If you do get some more towards the inside, that's completely fine. We'll end up applying glue there later on, but for right now we're just doing those edges. So you'll go around the full edges, and then once you're ready to press those down to the inside, you're going to start with the thin sides first, and then do the thicker sides after that point. Just helps kind of reinforce and brace those smaller papers so they're not picking up as much. One thing that I do have students have issues with sometimes if the glue is not tacky enough yet, sometimes those thinner papers will start to pick up quite a bit. If you're finding that's the case, what I would do is grab a bone folder and then press those edges down, and you can use that with each of them. Just making sure that if you're doing this, that you are, if it's getting in contact with glue, either wiping that off as you go or just kind of keeping in mind you're going to rinse it off at the end. And then you'll do same thing with that top and bottom, getting those pressed down, and then using the bone folder if you need to. This will bring us to our last application of glue, and this is going to be gluing the end slips down to the inside. Purpose of the end slips is just to neaten out that inside, so instead of seeing where that cover paper is folded over and the book board, it's going to make it a lot neater and make it look a little bit more professional. So with us, you're going to do that thin, even layer of glue once again. The one difference with this is instead of going to the very edges, you're going to reserve about that 1/2 inch around the edge. It's just going to keep it so you're gluing just the end slip down, and you're not going to have an issue with your covers either sticking together or sticking to the parchment paper. Once you have that fully coated, then what you're going to do is you're going to grab your end slip, you're going to get it aligned with the cover, and then you're going to get it pressed down. Again, you're going to start in the middle to avoid any air bubbles, push out to the edges, and then same thing as before, you can use your bone folder once again to just kind of clear out any air pockets or wrinkles that might have appeared. And this will bring you to the end of the construction. So if you just did one cover at this point, you're going to redo these steps for the second one. And then once you have both of those ready to go, we're going to do one last step before we get these under the press weight under the front. And this step is going to be getting your name or initials on that cover along with the period number. This is gonna just help you find and locate these. Usually what I'll do is in the morning as I will section these off into classes. So get some sort of identifier in there and make it easier for me to sort those, and then also make sure that yours is just not ending up in the set of no name ones that I get. Once you're ready to bring those up to the press weight, you're going to grab your 2 pieces of parchment. You're not going to glue those down at all, but what you're going to do is use those to separate your covers so they don't get stuck together. So you'll have your one cover parchment over the top, your second cover parchment once again, and then you'll bring those up to the front counter under the press weight. The press weight or seal weight, it's going to be a gray metal plate. It has 2 handles. When you go up to the front counter, you're going to lift it up. You're going to put your 2 covers underneath, either on the front counter or on the stack that is started. And then as you get those set down, if you are somebody where your parchment is starting to curl, just flip it over. Sometimes when it gets that just slight moisture contact from the glue, it starts to curl up a little bit. It should just flatten it back out once you flip it over. And then you'll just get your seal weight back over the top. We'll leave these overnight to dry. The seal weight is just going to make sure that those dry completely flat, and it's going to minimize any chance of it warping. From there, you're going to head back to your spot, and we're going to get a few things cleaned up. First thing is you're going to take your brush, rinse it out in the sink. You're going to aim for about like 20 to 30 seconds on this, either scrubbing it out in your hands or on the bottom of the sink. Either way works, but you're just thinking of getting all that excess glue removed. Just kind of checking every now and again, making sure that you're not leaving any behind. Please take the time to wash these out. They take a lot of soaking if they're left to dry with glue in them. So take that time. Think of just kind of how you would want to find them when you come back. So make sure you get that fully cleaned out. And then once you have that cleaned out, grab a paper towel to dry it off. You're also going to grab a paper towel, get it damp, and then we'll use that just to wipe down a few things. So for cleanup, you're going to get that glue fully closed and sealed back up. If you used the bone folder for any parts of the gluing, you're going to take that damp paper towel and just kind of wipe it down. If it got really covered, you can take it over the sink and wash it off too. And then you'll also wipe down the cutting mat if you did get contact with glue. And then stuff that can get recycled. Newspaper can all be recycled. You can also take those trimmings from the corners of your cover paper and get those in the recycling as well. And then like I mentioned, if you did get any contact with glue, get the cutting mats wiped off. If you didn't get any, you don't need to do this, but just make sure that you don't have any glue left on there. And then we'll get stuff returned to where you found them. So if you grabbed a utility knife or scissors, those are going to go back. The bone folder, brush, glue, scissors, all of those are going to go back up to the front counter, and then just make sure you're getting those back to where you found them. That is the cover construction. Tomorrow we're going to start on the binding. Let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, you are good to go.